Hello, happy Easter to you. I started on Monday with the idea of using Pisanki eggs. That's sort of the designs that you find on decorated eggs, and I sort of deduced some of the designs from stamps. I think they were Polish stamps with these designs on them. And what I want to do is go on with that sort of same tangent, but I want to incorporate a bit of stamping, sort of potato print. And for those of you who have done my workshop on sketchbook revival, you would have seen the stamping that I've done with loo roll in particular, and the cardboard tube, I should say, the inner tube, and which is a very effective way of creating round marks or roundish forms. But I also use potato printing, and so I want to do some of that today because it's one of these very, very simple methods. It's foolproof, it's cheap, it's accessible, it's usable for all ages. So it's something that can completely be done in an art practice. There's nothing to say you have to now use sponges instead of of potatoes. You know, you get silicone sponges and all sorts of options. But I find these actually better because there's sort of a dampness to it. So the shapes are that I've just sort of pre-cut, but I'm going to do some printing and just base it on what I've done here. And I'm going to incorporate a bit of these colors as well, softer colors, but with some yellows, pink, soft sort of salmon colors. They're not all going to be super bright. This was done a while back. I'm actually still working on it. I started doing this when I was speaking on the phone, and that was just mostly stamping with a brush. So there's a bit of difference in colors, colors being stamped and printed with a brush. And I think I used a leak on that as well. So this was done in a Hanemüller sketchbook, watercolor sketchbook. So it's a nice paper that's a bit robust. Oh, I've got some eggs here as well. I'm not going to actually paint on eggs. I just have these because it's beautiful color. Look at this sage green color. So I'm trying to get myself to use some of these colors as well. Let me just carefully put this away so I don't drop the whole bowl of eggs. So you see here some of the slightly more muted colors, but I want to use it in combination. So some bright and some more muted. And that often is a secret to making good design, is incorporating neutral colors with bright colors so that they don't all fight. So it's not this constant competition of which color is sort of brightest, best, strongest. So there's a bit of a respite in between busy areas. You know where you want to sort of draw the attention to. So I'm going to use my color palette and sort of just see what I have here. And then I'm also adding gouache. Now, gouache is water. Basically, it's watercolor paint, but it's a white option. And typically, you don't get white in a watercolor set. Some have it. The bigger sets will have a white one, depending on the manufacturer. But it's sort of traditionally, you're not supposed to paint with white watercolor. The white is, if you're a purist, it's supposed to be the technique of keeping the paper white. So that's often the thinking behind it. But I like painting in layers, and I like to sometimes have more opaque pastel colors, so I mix the two. And what I'm using is Holbein gouache, and I buy it in larger quantities. You can see the tube because you'll use more of that. So first of all, let me not bring that in straight away. I'm going to do a sort of egg colored stamp. I think the session today is going to be a bit longer, so I'm just going to allow myself to not work too quickly, and let's see where we go. So I'm going to use some browns and greens, browns and greys I mean, maybe a bit of green. Just going to mix it in there, and instead of stamping the potato, in other words, instead of collecting the water to stamp on the potato, oh, that doesn't make sense, I'll explain it again. I'll just explain it as I do. So instead of me doing this and getting the paint on the potato by collecting the paint from the palette, I'm painting with a paintbrush. And in the first instance, I'm actually going to paint the shape of this potato to look a bit like an egg shape, sort of a greenish egg shape. And I'm pressing it down there, just applying some firm pressure, and there you go. And what I like about it is that there's the variety on it. It's not a perfect shape. So in other words, if I had to paint it, I would do it more perfectly. If I do it like this, there's a bit of variety. There's that imperfection. And if I feel it's too much in places, I can always go over it with my brush and fill in the color there. So it's almost like a marker. The paint is a bit like the print becomes sort of a marker. In other words, you have the confines of the shape. So you see the shape, and I can now go and paint sort of over it to blend it in. I've got more water in that one and a bit more paint in this one. So let me make this one a bit darker to the side. I don't want to make it too wet because I want to paint on it in the session still, and I don't want the paint to bleed too much. And the last one, I'm doing the same thing. When I cut it, I think the top there's a bit of an angle to it, to the potato. Let me just move this a bit further away. Make sure it's all in, and oh, that's a bit skew. That's fine. Just make sure the top is printed. So that one printed. It looks like the heel of shoes actually. And what I'm going to do with this one is to sort of manually adjust it. And then for the bottom, so it's going to be quite odd eggs. The bottom, I'm going to go a bit more grey, and I'm deliberately adding a bit more of the paints grey. And then just to explain how you can get variety of colors, I'm painting it more yellow at the top. So let's see. So celebrating wonky a little bit, making things, all of a sudden that looks to me like a sloth hanging off a half circle. That was not the plan. So if I want to, while it's wet, make the color a bit different, I can, for instance, here add more brown. Just sort of mix it into the paper. The paper I'm working on is Expression. It's again a Harlem yellow paint, and it's a hot press, but it's quite smooth. No, sorry, it's not a hot press. It's a cold press, but it's quite it's quite a smooth paper for a cold press paper. Cold press is when the paper has more texture. Hot press is when it's much more smooth. If you think of almost in terms of ironing a shape. So that's a fairly odd one. Let's see what happens if I print this egg shape in a green. Just to blend onto that. And I'm leaving that band in between because I want it to look like a decorated egg. At the top, I'm going to make it a bit more pointy. One can, of course, if you plan this, find a potato that looks very much like an egg, because an egg always has a finer top than the base. And this, I think, is where it always is an air bubble. So if you eat an egg, that's sort of that, you eat it from that side, so you have that, if it's a boiled egg. So my shape is not a perfect egg shape, but that is also fine, because I think I've got a plan with this. I'll post it afterwards. I might do a black background, therefore cutting in some of the shape, so it makes it more perfectly egg-like, egg-shaped like. This one, I'm going to do something different. I am going to print it as if it's an egg shape, and in order to get that shape, I am going to cut out a piece of paper and get something suitable. I'm going to cut it out so that it is the shape of an egg, half of an egg. Let me just match it up there. Just give me a second. And the reason for doing this is, so if I stamp over it, it blocks off the base. Now that's gone too big. Let me do this again. I just want to, in the inside of this, create this egg shape. And I'm going to do something different here as well. I'm actually going to pick up the paint, sort of dried watercolor paint there, and I'm picking it up and doing the stamping like this. So that should explain what I'm saying. So if you want to do something like this, where you don't have an egg-shaped potato, you just block off the sides with paper, then you can do that as well, and it gets quite a good effect. Now, with these bits, it's still a little bit damp. That's drying a bit more. I am looking at my shapes to add. So if you've just joined me, sorry, I'm looking at these patterns that I've created from the Pisanki eggs, and these are traditional. I'd probably say it's Russian, Polish. It's actually really very ancient method of decorating eggs. And I think it completely predates any religious connotation to it. It's sort of that became Easter eggs, but it's about rebirth, spring, new season. And I am looking at my designs. Let me move this a bit lower, and just adapting it. So I've got these shapes, and I'm turning them into designs to go onto the egg. And I'm just quite methodically painting it. I'm using an angled a dagger brush, and that allows me to sort of have quite a sharp angle. I'm using it sort of the wrong way around, because you can also use it like this, but it sort of gives me quite a sharp angle, sharp point. And this is something I use and explain in my course. My next course is coming up. It starts on Monday. And it's a 3-week course. But I also have a completely free project if you want to look on my website. It's a free project based on the same project I did for Sketchbook Revival. And so it's a printing project, like a kaleidoscope. Very simple. It's something you can really do with children. It's something that is suitable for anyone. You can incorporate different colors in it. It's just a sort of a simple exercise, but you can turn it into what you want to make of it. And it's something that's quite foolproof because it's done on a circular shape. It all fits in like a kaleidoscope, like a mandala. This one is looking very ethnical, actually. Ethnic. I am going to deliberately add something like those flowers, and I am using a muted blue. So I've added a bit of gouache to the blue. So there you can see it becomes opaque. It's a pastel color. So my blue that is there has some gouache in it, and immediately it makes it into this flat blue color. What should I do? Doing the same thing there. And then here, I'm just going to do a line. So I want to bring it back to the more traditional designs as you find in Poland. I don't want to make it too ethnic in appearance. Let's see. I might just do some lines there. This is a good meditative project as well. The process is quite simple. There's not much that can go wrong, and if it goes wrong, it doesn't matter. You just do another one. And that is very often my approach, is just sort of see what happens, have a go, try it out. Okay, I'm going to do one that's a bit more green. It's got more bright green in it. And this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to take that red and use it as green. So there, the paper is a bit damp. It's bleeding a bit. I'm not going to fuss too much with it now. So you can create your own unique egg shape based on these traditional designs. I'll leave that a little bit to I'll just leave that bleeding to just happen there. It doesn't matter. Now this one is looking quite odd. Let's make that into something more special. I'm going to use a fine brush. This is a snowdrop brush. And let's go for, let me see. I'm going to stick to the blues here. So blue, but not, my colors are not particularly clean, as in all of it there's a sort of a mutedness to the color. And here I am going over the egg there. So this is also a bit damp. You might want to wait a little bit before painting, and I obviously don't want to wait because this is part of the demo. That looks quite Egyptian now, so I don't know what I'm doing, but it's not looking particularly it's not looking necessarily very Polish. It's okay. Let's see if we can get it back there. That's the thing with a lot of folk designs. It translates to different cultures, I think. One other tip is, so you have the neutral colors that you have with bright colors. And my other tip that I always say to people is to use fewer colors. Don't Don't try and put everything in there all at once, because that is confusing. So work with fewer colors, and then you add more colors as you continue. So I'm going to make it look as if they are sort of this 4-leaf floral on the back as well. And then I am going to put in quite a bright pink, strong red there as well. It's bleeding a little bit. I quite like it. I quite like the fact that there's this imperfection to the shapes. It's not very wet. I'm going to add a spiral. So this would actually be nice with gold as well, and I have no idea if that's anything that traditionally would be used. My guess is no. I'm just indulgent and thinking about adding a bit of gold accent, and that is something which, if you work with neutral colors, you bring gold in, so that it is very effective. Okay, so here I'm going to go with that spiral shape that I already have. Just bring that in. And at the bottom, I'm going back to this very, very bright, like an egg yolk yellow. Bring that in there. Now, this one is still completely wet. This leaf I painted there, I will eventually make it better. I will neaten it up. But as I said, sometimes it's good to go with these slightly wonky lines. It's good to celebrate imperfection. Not everything has to always be perfectly right. It makes you sometimes look at something. That's something I have noticed. If something is slightly not right, there's that sort of ambiguity about something, then you will look at it more than if something is perfectly solved. So in other words, if something is, if you look at a painting of a rose and it looks exactly like a rose, you're going to go, well, it's beautifully done and it's exquisite, but it's all resolved for you. Whereas if there's something a bit different about it, maybe out of place, you will look at it harder and your brain will become engaged with it more. The same goes for really simple designs as well. If there's something that's just a little bit different to it, some element added to it, you will notice it, you will remember it. Okay, so that one turned out quite well with the white detail on it. It was a bit stark to start off with. That was the sloth one. And this one, now it looks like something something looking over with it looks almost like a little chick. So I need to change the appearance of the eyes there. And I'm going to, let's go all sweet and lovely, and I'm going to make some heart shapes on it. I'm using a sort of Prussian blue color, very strong blue, a greenish blue color. So essentially I'm using the primary colors in this. I'm not varying that much from it, but I'm using colors that are basically primary colors, but they are not perfectly, it's not a perfect scarlet. It's sort of an orangey red. And here I'm sort of painting them at the same time. And it has there's a bit of a link to them. So I do hope you'll have a bit of time to either paint on eggs or just paint on paper, paint eggs on paper, incorporate some printing. And let's see, what else can I bring in there? I would like to have more yellow in this as well. And I'm going to go upside down because this sort of goes up. I'm doing, actually I want to use this brush. It's even a bit, has a finer tip. It's a bigger brush, but it has a fine tip. And I'm not going to touch on the yellow quite because I don't want it to bleed into the orange. And it's quite a little dollop of color. And then to make it appear like it goes around the egg, I'm making the lines a bit shorter to the ends. And there's my 3 slightly wonky, slightly imperfect eggs, and I really like them. I'm going to do some more of them. I think I'm going to do a whole sheet of them. I'm not too worried where I miss color, where they sort of spilled a bit of color. I'll just incorporate those. And I might end up painting black around it. And that's one of the other techniques I'm showing in my course of working with watercolor, and then you block out the background, and then it makes the color absolutely pop. So that's another technique, and for that I use acrylic ink, not watercolor. So I like combining it. I'm just filling this in a bit more. This red here has shifted as well. So my advice is, if you do this, make sure that the print, if you did the stamping with the potatoes, make sure it has dried. Otherwise you will get this bleeding happening as you have there. But as I said, I have plans for it, so it's not a disaster, but it's not how I would have done it if I planned it from the beginning. I would allow it to dry. And those two are now completely linking up, so I'm just making them link up. Oh, that really is bleeding a bit. Let's just blink it out. I'm going to work with white on top of this. I was saying earlier on about me using where did I put the, squeeze it out, there's the gouache I was talking about. And typically if I were to use this, you use it like watercolor, you just dilute it a bit, but you want a strong mixture. There are very few places I can paint with it that's not still damp, but typically you can then have strong contrast. I prefer doing it this way than working with something like a Posca pen. I know there are people who really like using the markers. I'm not too keen on bringing them in paintings. The mark is just a bit too, what I call blunt, whereas with a paintbrush you can control it, and you can use it with a dip pen as well. So I can use gouache with a dip pen as well, and I might do that, but I'm not going to do it at this point. As I said, it's still not quite dry enough to use everywhere, but I'm not going to add any more colors, so the detail that will be added to it will be the same colors and a bit of white. But so what I've learned today, what I've learned from this is this, what I wouldn't normally do, having the paint bleeding like that. I am painting more in control typically, and I quite like that surprising element of the evidence of watercolor paint sort of bleeding into each other. I'm not averse to it. I think it's good to just embrace what I call happy accidents, or what I would refer to in this case as a sort of a happy accident, a discovery, discovering something that you wouldn't wish, but which you are sort of pleasantly surprised by. Okay, so there are my 3 Pisanki eggs. I really enjoy painting them. If you want to make yours, you can join the Facebook group as well and post it there. That's Explore Color Creative Prompts. Or if you want to do it on Instagram. And if I need to give away my this watercolor set. I will do it to people who've tagged me on the posts, if they've done anything from the my free project or Karen's sketchbook revival, and this is on Instagram. I will pick in the next day or so. I'll leave it until the end of the day, end of Friday, and then I will pick a winner, and I'll send you this high chroma paint. There's some lovely colors in it. It's a core high chroma 6 color set. Okay, so for now I'm going to say goodbye and have a good weekend if you have a long weekend. Otherwise, it's just a good, lovely Friday, and I hope you'll make some time for creativity. Okay, bye-bye.